silver dealers across North America started posting emergency messages on their websites in early February 2026. Major bullion retailers like APMEX, Bullion, and SD Bullion warned customers about unprecedented supply constraints and delivery delays stretching 12 to 16 weeks. Some products were simply listed as unavailable with no estimated restock date. This wasn't normal market tightness. Dealers with 20 to 30 years in the business were saying they'd never seen anything like this. Premiums on basic silver rounds jumped from $3 over spot to $12 over spot in a matter of days. And the most alarming part? This is happening while COMEX still shows adequate inventory numbers. The disconnect between what dealers are experiencing and what official markets report tells you everything about the collapse that's underway. Let me show you what's actually happening at the dealer level right now. This is information coming directly from the people who sell physical silver to retail investors and small institutions every single day. APMEX, one of the largest precious metals dealers in the United States, posted a supply update on February 3rd that should have made headlines everywhere. They announced that generic silver rounds and bars were facing manufacturing delays of 8 to 10 weeks due to blank shortages at mints. This means the facilities that produce the actual silver products don't have enough raw material to maintain normal production schedules. Think about what that means. Mints purchase refined silver, melt it down, and stamp it into coins, rounds, and bars that dealers then sell to customers. If mints are running out of silver blanks, it means the supply chain from refiners to manufacturers has broken down. Bullion sent an email to their customer list on February 5th explaining that American silver eagles, the most popular silver coin in the U.S. market, were completely sold out with no clear timeline for restocking. The U.S. Mint, which produces silver eagles, had already announced production would be limited in 2026 due to blank supply issues. But dealers expected some inventory. Instead, they got nothing. SD Bullion went even further. Their February 6th update warned customers that silver premiums would likely increase significantly over the next 60 to 90 days as dealer inventories depleted and replacement inventory became harder to source. They specifically mentioned that their wholesale suppliers were quoting 10 to 14-week delivery times for products that normally shipped within 7 to 10 days. These aren't small regional dealers making excuses for poor inventory management. These are major national retailers that move millions of ounces annually and have deep relationships with mints, refiners, and wholesalers worldwide. When they all sound the alarm at the same time, it signals a systemic problem. I spoke with contacts at several smaller dealers who confirmed the same issues. One dealer in Texas told me he placed an order for 10,000 ounces of generic rounds on January 20th. Normally, that order would ship within 2 weeks. He was told delivery would be late March at the earliest, possibly April. When he pushed for an explanation, his supplier admitted they couldn't get refined silver from their normal sources. Another dealer in Florida shared that his wholesaler offered him silver at $9 over spot when normal premiums run $2.50 to $3.50 over spot. When he asked why the premium was so high, the wholesaler said that's what they're paying to source metal in the physical market. COMEX shows silver at $76, but actual physical transactions are happening at $85 to $88 for wholesale quantities. The Canadian market is experiencing the same crisis. Dealers in Toronto and Vancouver report that Royal Canadian Mint products are back-ordered 6 to 8 weeks. The Perth Mint in Australia has similar delays. These are government mints with established supply chains and priority access to domestic mining production. If they can't get enough silver to meet demand, what does that say about overall supply? What makes this especially concerning is the inventory drawdown happening simultaneously. Dealers typically maintain 4 to 6 weeks of inventory based on normal sales velocity. This buffer allows them to fulfill orders while waiting for new shipments from suppliers. But recent sales surges following Friday the 13th depleted that buffer. Dealers are now in a position where they're selling inventory they don't physically have yet. They're taking orders based on expected deliveries from suppliers. But those deliveries keep getting delayed or reduced. This creates a backlog of unfulfilled customer orders that grows every week. Some dealers have stopped taking new orders entirely for certain products. They're only selling what they have in hand. Once current inventory sells out, those product listings just show unavailable. This is unprecedented in modern precious metals markets. The premium structure tells the real story. In normal markets, premiums on physical silver over spot prices reflect manufacturing costs, dealer margins, and shipping. Total premiums typically run $2 to $5 per ounce depending on product type. But in February 2026, premiums exploded to $10 to $15 per ounce for common products. This isn't dealers' price gouging. This is supply and demand reality. When dealers can't source replacement inventory except at elevated prices in physical markets, they have to pass those costs to customers. The alternative is selling at a loss, which isn't sustainable. What dealers won't say publicly but admit privately is that they're worried about their own survival. If they can't get inventory to sell, they have no business. Some smaller dealers are already considering closing operations temporarily until supply chains normalize. But there's no indication when or if that normalization will happen. The U.S. Mint's production constraints add another layer to the crisis. They announced in January that 2026 Silver Eagle production would be capped at approximately 28 million coins due to silver blank shortages. In 2023, they produced over 45 million Silver Eagles. That's a 38% reduction in the most popular retail silver product in America. Now let me explain the manufacturing breakdown that's causing the dealer crisis. This goes deeper than simple supply and demand. The entire production infrastructure for retail silver products is failing. Silver rounds, bars, and coins don't come directly from refiners. Refiners produce 1,000-ounce bars or grain silver that meets industrial specifications. These large bars then go to mints and private manufacturers who melt them down and produce the retail products that dealers sell. This secondary manufacturing layer is where the breakdown is happening, and it's happening for reasons that most investors don't understand. First, there's a shortage of silver blanks. Blanks are the raw discs of silver that get stamped with designs to create coins. Several major blank manufacturers, primarily located in the United States and Europe, produce these for government mints and private mints worldwide. These blank manufacturers are experiencing their own supply problems. They need refined silver to produce blanks, but the refined silver that used to come from China in steady supply is now sporadic at best due to export restrictions. Without consistent refined silver supply, blank manufacturers can't maintain production schedules. The U.S. Mint relies heavily on two major blank suppliers. Both have reported significant production shortfalls in early 2026. One temporarily shut down operations for 2 weeks in January due to lack of raw material. This directly impacts Silver Eagle production and creates ripple effects throughout the entire retail silver market. Private mints that produce generic rounds and bars face the same issue. Sunshine Minting, one of the largest private mints in North America, posted an update in late January acknowledging extended production times due to silver supply constraints. They're running at roughly 60 to 70% of normal capacity because they can't source enough refined silver to run full production. Royal Canadian Mint announced similar constraints. Despite Canada being a major silver mining country, the mint can't get enough refined silver because Canadian mine output gets sent to Chinese refiners for processing. The refined metal is supposed to come back, but export restrictions mean it's staying in China or being diverted to other markets. This creates an absurd situation. Canada mines silver. That silver gets shipped to China for refining. The refined silver doesn't come back. So the Royal Canadian Mint, which should have natural access to domestic supply, faces shortages and has to source refined silver from European refiners at premium prices. The Perth Mint in Australia faces similar dynamics. Australia is a significant silver producer, but most output goes to Asian refiners. The refined product then has to be purchased back at global market prices. With Asian physical markets trading at premiums to Western paper prices, Australian manufacturers are paying more for refined silver than the spot price suggests. Beyond raw material shortages, manufacturing capacity itself is constrained. You can't just add new production lines overnight to make silver coins. The equipment is specialized and expensive. The dies that stamp designs wear out and need replacement. Quality control for legal tender coins is strict. Even if refined silver became freely available tomorrow, mints couldn't immediately ramp production to meet current demand. They would need months to increase capacity, hire and train workers, and install additional equipment. This means the supply shortage will persist even if raw material issues get resolved. Labor shortages compound the manufacturing problems. Skilled workers who can operate minting equipment and maintain quality standards are limited. The precious metals minting industry isn't large enough to have a deep labor pool. When demand surges, manufacturers can't just hire more workers to increase output. Some private mints tried running overtime shifts and extended hours to increase production. But this created quality control issues. When workers are fatigued and equipment runs beyond normal maintenance schedules, defect rates increase. Products that don't meet specifications have to be melted and recast, which wastes time and materials. The energy costs for melting and minting have also increased significantly. Natural gas and electricity prices in North America and Europe rose substantially in 2025 and early 2026. For manufacturers running furnaces and presses continuously, energy represents a major cost component. Some smaller mints have reduced production simply because operating at full capacity isn't profitable at current energy prices. Transport and logistics add more constraints. Even when manufacturers produce inventory, getting it to dealers faces challenges. Shipping costs for heavy precious metals packages increased. Insurance requirements became more strict as silver values rose. Some freight carriers limited the value of precious metals they'll transport on a single truck. All these factors combine to create a manufacturing bottleneck that can't be quickly resolved. Dealers are sounding the alarm because they see both ends of the problem. Customer demand is surging following Friday the 13th and growing awareness of supply issues. But their ability to source inventory from manufacturers is declining week by week. Let me break down the refinery crisis that's at the root of the entire supply collapse. This is where the real breakdown is happening, and it's the part of the story that connects everything. Global silver refining capacity is approximately 1.1 billion ounces annually. China controls roughly 700 to 750 million ounces of that capacity. This isn't just Chinese mine output. This is the processing capacity to take silver ore and concentrates from anywhere in the world and turn them into refined silver that industry can actually use. Mexico produces the most silver by mine output, roughly 190 million ounces per year. But Mexico has limited domestic refining capacity, maybe 40 to 50 million ounces annually. The rest of Mexican concentrate gets shipped to China for refining. Same story for Peru, Bolivia, and other major producers in South America. This created a system where silver gets mined in the Americas but refined in Asia. The refined product is then supposed to flow back to where it's needed based on market demand. Manufacturers in the US order refined silver. It ships from Chinese refineries, and the supply chain functions smoothly. That system broke down in late 2024 and completely collapsed in early 2026. Chinese authorities implemented export licensing requirements for refined silver classified as a strategic material. Refiners need government approval to ship metal outside China. Approval times are unpredictable. Some applications sit in bureaucratic review for months. Others get denied without explanation. The practical effect is that Chinese refining capacity is no longer accessible to Western markets. The metal gets refined. It exists. But it stays in China or goes to countries that Beijing considers strategic partners. North American and European buyers are cut off. This created immediate crisis for companies that relied on Chinese refining. A solar panel manufacturer in California that used to order 50,000 ounces monthly from a Chinese refiner suddenly couldn't get supply. Their orders got accepted, payment processed, but shipments never happened. Export license pending, month after month. The manufacturer tried switching to European refiners. But European refining capacity is only about 150 to 180 million ounces annually, and it was already committed to existing customers. Swiss refiners, the gold standard for precious metals processing, had order backlogs extending 20 to 24 weeks by January 2026. North American refining capacity is even more limited, roughly 60 to 80 million ounces annually. Most of this capacity is tied to mining operations that refine their own output. Independent refineries that process material from multiple sources are few and already operating at maximum capacity. I spoke with a refinery executive in Nevada who explained the constraints they face. Even if they wanted to expand operations to meet demand, it would take 18 to 24 months to install new equipment and get regulatory approvals. Environmental regulations for refining operations are strict. You can't just build a new facility quickly. The refinery crisis also affects recycling operations. Roughly 180 to 200 million ounces of silver get recycled annually from industrial scrap, old jewelry, and obsolete electronics. This recycled silver needs to be refined to bring it back to specification for reuse. Recycling refineries face the same capacity constraints as primary refineries. They're overwhelmed with material because higher silver prices make recycling more economical. But they can't process material any faster than their equipment allows. Backlogs at recycling facilities mean metal that should be flowing back into supply chains is sitting in warehouses waiting to be processed. The shortage of refining capacity creates a bottleneck that higher prices alone can't solve. Even if silver trades at $150 per ounce, you can't magically create new refining capacity overnight. The physical infrastructure takes years to build. This is why dealers are sounding the alarm. They understand that the supply crisis isn't about mining production. Mines are operating. Silver ore is being extracted. The problem is processing that ore into usable metal and then manufacturing it into retail products. Without access to Chinese refining capacity and with Western refineries maxed out, the flow of metal into retail channels has slowed to a trickle. Dealers can't sell what they can't source, and they can't source it because the refining infrastructure can't produce it fast enough to meet demand. Now let me explain what dealers are privately telling each other about what comes next. Because their outlook is much darker than what they're sharing with customers publicly. The dealer consensus is that supply conditions will worsen significantly through the second quarter of 2026 before there's any possibility of improvement. Several factors drive this pessimistic view. First, the Chinese refinery situation shows no signs of changing. Geopolitical tensions between the US and China are escalating, not de-escalating. Trade disputes, technology restrictions, and strategic competition mean Beijing has no incentive to resume normal silver exports. If anything, they're likely to tighten restrictions further. Second, Western refining capacity can't expand quickly enough to matter. Even with maximum investment and regulatory fast-tracking, new refining capacity won't come online until late 2027 or 2028. That's 2 years of operating in a deficit environment where demand exceeds available supply. Third, investment demand is accelerating. Friday the 13th woke up millions of investors to the reality of supply constraints and paper market dysfunction. Physical silver buying by retail investors and institutions is running at the highest levels since 2011. This demand competes directly with industrial users for the limited available supply. Dealers are watching their order volumes carefully. In January and February 2026, retail investment buying increased by 300 to 400% compared to the same period in 2025. If this pace continues, retail demand alone could absorb 100 to 150 million ounces in 2026. That's 12 to 15% of total annual supply going to investors who will hold it rather than consuming it in manufacturing. Fourth, the solar industry's demand curve is steepening. Government renewable energy mandates mean solar panel production must increase regardless of silver availability. Manufacturers will pay whatever price is necessary to secure supply for production. This creates competition for available metal that will keep premiums elevated. Dealers expect physical premiums to settle into a new normal range of $10 to $15 over spot prices for basic products. Premium products like government-minted coins could see premiums of $18 to $25. These aren't temporary spikes. This is the new cost structure for physical silver in a supply-constrained environment. Some dealers are considering rationing systems to manage limited inventory. Instead of selling unlimited quantities to any buyer, they might implement purchase limits per customer per month. This would stretch available inventory across more buyers and reduce the risk of large buyers depleting their entire stock in single transactions. The used and secondary market is becoming increasingly important. Dealers are paying higher premiums to buy back silver from customers who want to sell. Metal that came from investors is being recycled back into the retail market because new production from mints is insufficient. This creates an interesting dynamic. Long-term holders who bought silver years ago at $20 to $30 are now seeing premiums of $85 to $95 in dealer buyback offers. Some are taking profits, which provides dealers with inventory to resell. But this selling is limited because most long-term holders understand the supply crisis is real and getting worse. Dealers are also exploring direct relationships with refiners and mints to bypass traditional wholesale distribution. If they can secure even small allocations directly from manufacturers, it gives them competitive advantage over dealers still dependent on wholesalers with long backlogs. Several larger dealers are considering vertical integration. Instead of just retailing products manufactured by others, they're exploring purchasing or partnering with small private mints. This would give them some control over production and guaranteed allocation of manufactured products. The dealer community is also watching COMEX delivery data closely. If major buyers start standing for delivery of futures contracts in large numbers, it will drain registered inventory that might otherwise flow to retail markets. Every ounce that goes to fulfill COMEX delivery obligations is an ounce that doesn't reach dealers for resale. What dealers fear most is a complete breakdown in the wholesale distribution system. If mints can't get refined silver, they stop producing. If they're not producing, wholesalers have nothing to sell. If wholesalers have nothing, dealers have nothing. And if dealers have nothing, retail investors have no access to physical silver regardless of price. This worst-case scenario could force retail premiums to $30, $40, or even $50 over spot prices. At that point, the disconnect between paper markets and physical reality becomes so extreme that COMEX prices lose all relevance to actual transactions. Some dealers are quietly preparing for this outcome. They're building cash reserves to purchase inventory opportunistically when it becomes available. They're strengthening relationships with suppliers who might give them priority access if allocation systems are implemented. They're educating customers about the supply situation, so expectations are realistic about delivery times and pricing. The message from dealers is consistent. This is not a temporary shortage that resolves in weeks or months. This is a structural supply crisis that will define silver markets for years. The sooner buyers understand and adjust to this reality, the better positioned they'll be. For anyone watching from outside the industry, the dealer warnings should be taken seriously. These are businesses with everything to lose if they call the situation wrong. When they unanimously say supply has collapsed and conditions are worsening, they're risking their reputations and customer relationships. They wouldn't do that unless the situation was genuinely critical. The supply collapse is real. The dealer alarms are justified. And what comes next depends on whether Western refineries can somehow ramp capacity or whether the market adjusts to permanent scarcity through much higher prices that destroy enough demand to bring markets back into balance.